Thank you guys so much for tuning in to another episode of Authors to Know and Their Books to Read. My name is Martinique Brown. I'm so excited that you guys have decided to tune in to the show today. I'm excited about our author that's going to be on the show. Her name is Latoya Wallace, and she is the author of The Darkside That Birthed My Worship. This is going to be such a good talk today. If this is your first time ever tuning into the show, what I need you to do right now is go ahead and share this video so that more individuals will know more about Latoya as well as her book and about the show. All of our contact information is listed in the description box. So let us know that you're in the virtual world. Tell us hello. Tell us, hey, how you doing? Let us know if you're having a great night or not. Another thing that we need you to do is go ahead and follow our Facebook page so that you will always be notified of any updates we have for me, any shows that I have. And I would love for you to also subscribe to my YouTube channel, which is listed in the description box. Latoya, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You are welcome. So can you just tell our viewers just a little bit more about yourself?
Well, Latoya L. Wallace. I am professionally an accountant, but spiritually I operate as a prophet. I am a brand new author of The Darkside That Birthed My Worship. A mother of three, wife. Yeah, that's pretty much it in a nutshell.
I did not know that you was an accountant by trade. I'm gonna tell you, tell you something about me. I hated accounting. I'm telling you, I had to pray all the time about those tests. I'm like, Jesus, please, if you could just help me.
Believe me, I truly understand and feel the pain.
Yes. So can you tell us more about what vitiligo is?
Well, vitiligo is a skin condition, and what it is, the autoimmune attacks the melanocytes, the cells in your body that gives you pigment, and it attacks those pigment that gives you white patches. Ultimately, you lose all the pigment within your skin, within your body. So that's in a nutshell what vitiligo is. And ultimately you'll end up with white patches. They have what is called 3 different areas where it can either just be in one area of your body and just stay in that area like a focal point. It can be generalized, which is what pretty much mine pretty much is, where 90%, 90 to 95%, if not 100% of your pigment is lost. You completely lose your pigment in your body. And you have white patches, or you have what I am, a little white girl, what I call myself.
So go ahead. No, you go ahead.
So yeah, that's in a nutshell what it is. It just destroys the melanin within your body. And it's no cure for it. They don't have a cure. They don't really have a cause per se. There's been extensive research, and it's kind of linked back to an autoimmune deficiency, or it can be hereditary, something of that nature. But it's not really a concrete, definitive answer as to where it comes from.
So now, what I was surprised to see was I was looking. You know how people be Facebook stalking like your pages and stuff. So I was Facebook stalking your page, and I looked at, some of your pictures from the past, and I was so surprised to see that you actually were dark skinned, like a lot of your body.
Yes.
I didn't know that you lose so much over time.
Yeah, like I said, it's 3 what they would call categories of it. And they say different factors can play a part on the progression of it. Like mine began to show when I was 12. So I was born up until the age of 12 as dark as you.
Really?
Yes, I was born a chocolate little drop. And again, I started getting patches when I was 12, around 11, 12 years old. And as time progressed, it just completely progressed over my entire body.
So Do you remember when it started to happen? Like your mindset? Do you remember back then?
I do. I was a little girl, and it kind of starts in the sun exposure parts, areas of
Okay.
your body, like your hands, your elbows, your, feet, and things of that nature. And
Mm-hmm.
so mine was just a little spot that was on my index finger.
Okay.
Um, and it kind of just grew. My first reaction, as much as I can remember, and I even talk about it in the book, that moment, like one of the chapters is called That Moment.
Okay.
So I thought it was just like a burn, you
Uh-huh.
know, like I'm 12, trying to do my hair and things of that nature. So
Uh-huh.
I took it as just like a burn or just a scratch or something, because it's very subtle and it's very little. And then it just kind of grows and progress. So my first reaction, I thought I just burned myself. I
Mm-hmm.
really didn't, look too much into it until I realized it wasn't going away, and it was kind of getting bigger. And then that another spot appeared, like on one side it would appear, and then on the other side of my body, like the left side, it would appear in that exact same spot.
Really?
Yes, it
So
was
now, how were your
interesting.
parents like through this? Were they like, what in the world is going on?
um Initially it was kind of subtle. I grew up in a household where expression of emotions and things of that nature was kind
Uh-huh.
of settled. So I do remember showing it to my mom and, to my dad at one point, and
Mm.
it was kind of initially it was just kind of brush off. And
Okay.
I really don't know honestly how they took it initially, because it was nothing that we initially never talked about. you know it was more so you'll be okay. It wasn't taken as this is something that drastically serious until the patches started appearing more and more, and
Okay.
then that's when it became a concern where we ended up going to the doctor. I remember my mom sharing the experience that she had when she was younger, when she was in a horrific accident, and the pigment on her skin um, turned dark instead of white. So
Mm-hmm.
it was kind of like, oh, I went through that. My skin, I had a skin, issue when I was in an
I'm like,
accident and
Mama,
things of
that is
that
not the
nature.
same thing.
So initially, it was kind of a passive type thing.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Interesting. Interesting.
Yeah.
So, did you have to become comfortable with talking about it? Because, like you said, you grew up in a household where, expression wasn't really like big or anything like that. Did you have to become comfortable talking about this?
I I never talked about it. I
Really?
never talked about it. This
So,
is really, when I say literally, over 30 years of me now speaking about it and
uh-huh.
how I felt and my emotions and my experiences with it.
Hmm.
It all came out in the book. Growing up, I never talked about it. I carried that smile. I diverted the attention off of me, but it was never that inner emotion. So anyone who was always around me, whether it was my family or friends, they always looked at it as everything was okay with me. And I wasn't so much treated different from close relatives and family and friends. It was more so outside, and going around in the public around different people or going to different places. Um, and then even in high school, just working at my first job, things of those nature is one. But I've more so explained on the outside. Um, and I didn't really know what it was. So
Hmm.
I couldn't really explain a lot.
Hmm.
So I developed this defense mechanism to
Hmm.
whereas, what's wrong with you? Why you look like that? And then I would be defensive and ask, well, what's wrong with you? And why
Hmm.
you look like that? It was never a definitive explanation like, this is what's going on with me.
Well, if they asking like that, who is going to nicely
You would be
reply?
completely surprised and
No,
shocked.
that's what I'm saying. Like if somebody approaches somebody like that in kind of like an aggressive manner, like, well, what's
Hmm.
wrong? Who wants to? Don't nobody want to be nice
Or
like
in a
that.
disgusting matter, like you're
Yeah.
infected or something, or you're contagious, like, oh, what's wrong with you? But there were times where people would ask, in a nicer way, or just say, is it okay, in a more sensitive fashion.
Yeah.
Then the older I got, I knew how to explain it and express myself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But prior
So
to that, no.
yeah, so let me explain to us. Does it doesn't hurt or anything?
It doesn't hurt. The only thing, as far as what you would say, I guess a side effect or something like
Okay.
that, you can get sunburn.
Okay.
So if I'm exposed to the sun a lot, um, some would get a tan, but I would get a burn. So
Mm-hmm.
my skin would be completely red and it would burn. It would literally burn to where I would have to put ice or aloe vera, something to cool my skin down. So it burns the skin. There are cases, and there are rare cases where you can get skin cancer because you exposed to the sun. This is why one of the things that we have to do is be sensitive to the sun.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Now you guys, now you heard Latoya say that she is comfortable with questions. So post your questions. Don't be afraid. You got her here. So
Yes. Yes. Ask questions.
ask away. But if you're just now tuning in, what I would love for you to do is go ahead and share this video now. You are actually watching Authors to Know and Their Books to Read. I have Latoya Wallace on the show, and she is talking about her book, The Dark Side That Birthed My Worship. So now, can you actually walk us through your book?
Well, the dark side that birthed my worship, as I said, I've never spoken about it. The inner pain that I had to battle coming up as a little girl. So the book talks about personal experiences and personal encounters that no one never knew about.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I've never expressed how I dealt with it or how I overcame it. So the dark side is more so about a inner girl, an inner torment. Well, someone is saying, "Oh, you're beautiful," but the inner girl is telling me, "No, you're not. You don't belong here. You're ugly. Why are you looking this way?" So the dark side is that inner battle that I had when I would go to sleep at night, or those nights where I'm in my room alone and all I hear is this voice.
Mm-hmm.
And after different encounters that I talk about in the book from the time I was 12, like one chapter I said, I talked about the moments. So it kind of takes you through me from middle school through high school and up into my young adult years, and different encounters that I faced dealing with vitiligo,
Mm-hmm.
and ultimately how I overcame it. Because even in that dark place, I encountered God. And when I
Okay.
encountered God, it kind of turned the thing around for me in accepting the uniqueness of who I am. Because I'm the only one in my family that has vitiligo. I have known that even as a little girl. So it was that, why me? Why am I the one who has to turn and, go through this process? So my book talks about that, and it talks about those experiences. And at one point, I tried to commit suicide. At one point, I just hated myself so much to where
Yeah.
I tried to do everything by listening to that inner voice. And
Mm-hmm.
then when I encountered God, it turned it around to where I became a worshiper and built my relationship with Him, and accepting who He says I am and how He created me to be in the uniqueness I am.
Mm-hmm. So, what age were you when you did start growing in your relationship with God at that point?
Sorry. I want to say I grew up in the church. So I've been a church girl all my
Mm-hmm.
life. But as far as my own personal experience, I was around 14.
Okay.
And I was in that dark place. And I was crying out to God. And it wasn't so much as me crying out so much to God, but just crying out, and just having that place of, everybody think I'm okay, but I'm not. And
Mm-hmm.
then it's like no one can hear me, but I'm also not speaking. So
Mm-hmm.
you know how you say, well, you see a person, but they seem okay. But when you look behind their eyes, the pain is really behind their eyes.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm crying out like, why don't nobody see this, And even in that, I began to take the scriptures because, like I said, I grew up in church. So there was a youth pastor there, and he trained us on the different prayers. And so what I began to do is start meditating, meditating on those prayers. And in that moment, I encountered God in a way I never encountered Him just by going to church.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was different for me. So I'm like, okay, that's something else that I've never experienced. So, okay, it got to be you, God. And
Yeah.
so I could say around 14 is when I experienced it personally for myself, had an encounter with God.
Mm-hmm. And I just want to thank Patricia and Regina for tuning into the show. Regina says, this is so cool. She said, my cousin is new to her journey. Regina, let us know, how old is your cousin? So Latoya, I guess sometimes, okay, when I'm dealing with teenagers, I'll ask them like, hey, how you doing? Oh, I'm okay. Like, how does a person take it a step further to truly have that genuine conversation of how you're feeling about something?
Um, I think once you get to actually know a person, or just, especially someone who, because dark sides are subtle. We never really can know what a person is really battling unless you kind of build a relationship with that person.
Okay.
And even for me, when I was growing up with it, there were several times I would say something or I'll make a statement and it will always be passive, but it was actually me crying out. Like if I notice another spot, I would say, oh my God, I got another spot,
Mm-hmm.
you know. But then I would get the response, girl, what are you talking about? Like, don't nobody pay attention to that. You just Toya. But that can be a moment where I was actually crying out and it was never asked, well, what about the spot? How does that make you feel? So I think even when you ask a person how they're doing, but then if you get to know that person, I think eventually that person can tell you, or eventually that kindred spirit will kind of feel what that person, something not right about that person, or maybe just let dig a little deeper and just, or just talk to the person a little more and see maybe this really is affecting them. I never looked at it from their perspective.
Mm.
Yeah.
So if we have any family members or friends that's watching, what would you say to them in how they can begin to help, like Regina was saying, somebody that's new to their journey of, their vitiligo?
I would say with family and friends, I would say be as supportive as possible,
Mm-hmm.
um, and not passive. Be more supportive from the place of this is something new for them, and
Mm-hmm.
just whether how they're dealing with it, how are they understanding it, and not so much as, oh, that's just Diane or that's just Mary, because you look at that person character or personality, none of that may not change, but
Mm-hmm.
their outer appearance is changing. And
Mm-hmm.
just seeing how they are dealing with it or how they are understanding it. Support is the biggest thing, and that's for me is a lot of what carried me through even up until this day is support, because I did have a strong support system. I had my family, my church family, and I had my friends who that were close to me that didn't treat me any different. They did not treat me any different, but they also did not know the different encounters that I even talk about in the book. They will even tell you, I've never known that you were dealing with that. And
Yeah.
some of them were right there with me,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
So I think it's the support and just showing the love and compassion, but just taking it a step further to say, are you really okay? Like, how are you actually, dealing with this? How is it making you actually feel,
That's good.
to get that person to talk about it? Because one of the things it does is isolate you. It
Mm-hmm.
will isolate you and put you in a place where you feel no one really understands what you're going through. So you won't talk about it
Mm-hmm.
and you'll close yourself off in that area of communicating about it.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So now, do they have groups, like support groups for people that do have vitiligo?
They do. There is a wide variety. We just had a World Vitiligo Conference where it's national. So there is a lot of support out here. And it's funny that you asked me that, because growing up, I didn't know about support groups. I didn't know. We got to a place I talk about even in my book where we went to the doctor.
Mm-hmm.
And once the doctor told me and my parents that it was no cure, I went through high school and a large portion of my young adult years without ever going back to the doctor or ever going seeing a dermatologist. I didn't even know anyone or came in contact with anyone else who had vitiligo. I
Mm-hmm.
isolated myself that much because when they said it was no cure, at that point, it was no point, you know. And but there are so much support groups out here. Once I began to talk about it, and the book became, I cannot tell you how much support groups I have came in contact
That's
with, I
good.
have connected with. And
Yeah.
and I know without a doubt if that was something I would have had then growing up, I would not have went in that dark space for so long.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And you see so many different variations of the vitiligo as well, to what it is absolutely amazing. So it is definitely support groups. There is a lot more research that has been coming out within the last 20 years in regards to it. So a lot more doctors and dermatologists that specializes in vitiligo as well.
Mm-hmm. So now we actually have Regina that responded to my question when I asked her how old her family member was. She said that she's in her 50s. She struggled with acceptance, but is also an advocate. And she says she's
Mm-hmm.
going to tell her about your book.
Amazing, amazing. To God be the
Yeah,
glory.
yeah. So I guess one of my questions would be, because we are a society that judges people on their appearance and their ethnicity.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever struggle with, like, because you are, you know, of the whiter side, did you ever struggle with that at all? Or were you just considered, okay, just a light skinned black girl?
Right. um, I didn't struggle in regards to. I think if um, if a Caucasian or white person see me, they don't know what they don't. That's the look that I get. Like, I don't know if she's mixed, if she's
Uh-huh.
white, if she.
Uh-huh.
I've been asked, am I Asian? I've been
Uh-huh.
asked, am I Korean? You know, it's funny because I've dealt with the racism, but I've dealt with it from the perspective of um, not being whether I'm black or white, but more so whether I'm contagious or not. You know.
This is so, girl, please. Can we talk for like an hour? Okay.
Whether
Okay.
I'm contagious or not. I even talk about it again, one of those encounters where my first job, I was 16, like 15 or 16, and I worked at McDonald's. And
Uh-huh.
I worked at McDonald's downtown Chicago in a busy metro train station.
Okay.
And that's when there were the patches around my eyes, around my mouth, my hands, and things of that nature.
Yeah.
Um, so the racism that I experienced there was not wanting to be touched. People would move out of my line because they didn't know what or what not. So it's like, I don't want her to take my order. I don't want to be touched by her. She looks disgusting.
Latoya, can I just tell you something? I'm just so thankful. And I feel like I'm about to cry. But
Oh
I'm just so
God.
thankful that God helped you with this,
Wow. Wow.
because I just can't imagine
Yeah.
what you had to experience.
Yeah. Oh.
So I'm so sorry that you had to experience that.
Mm. It,
You
it,
know, because we see you now,
mm-hmm.
and we see you at the point where it's like there's no patches, but we don't think about the progression of it,
Yeah.
and how people treated you. So I'm just so sorry you had to experience that.
Oh, it's.
Give
I
me a
believe
tissue,
knowing now.
Latoya. Latoya, why? This is the first.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I'm just
Yeah,
so
it was.
thankful that God just helped you through this,
Um.
and that you became the woman that you are today, and that you did not allow depression or those suicidal thoughts to, just take you
To
out,
take,
because
yeah,
this is definitely a testimony to who God can truly just be in your life through any struggle
through
that
any
you
struggle.
have.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So
I
amen.
definitely
Come on,
give
Latoya.
him all the glory because it was a battle. It was a
Mm-hmm.
battle. Yeah. And even now, I still, you know, struggle. Um, but because I'm rooted and grounded in God,
Mm-hmm.
we all have those moments. Like even now, like even what you see on my arm, that just appeared within the last 2 years. So
Mm-hmm.
I even have those moments now. I'm like, oh my God, would you just go away and just let
Uh-huh.
me be the
Yeah, yeah.
one tone? But I take the joy of who I am and just the boldness and the confidence of who I've become because of my relationship in God. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's what the freedom and the liberation of it, which is why I was able, I believe, I know without a doubt that I was able to even talk about it now. Because when I tell you, for me to sit here and talk about it without being
Yeah.
emotional, it's only God. Because even then, at one point, I could not talk about it at
Mm-hmm.
all, at
Mm-hmm.
all. So yeah, it's definitely to God. It's definitely all to God.
So what inspired you to even share your story?
I was in Jules one day,
What's
and that was,
Jules?
I'm sorry.
What's Jules?
Oh, I'm sorry. I just assume everyone knows what Jules
Girl, we don't know Jules. What's that? A clothing store?
is. Jules is a grocery store.
Girl, they got a Jules grocery store.
Yes, Jules is a grocery store in our local community here
Uh
in
huh.
Illinois.
Uh
And
huh.
I was standing in line, and there was a bagger. It was a young girl. She had to be about 15, 16.
Uh huh.
And she was bagging our groceries. And her head was down,
Mm-hmm.
and she had vitiligo, but her head was down even as she was bagging, and her head was down. And
Okay.
so I just watched her as I was going through the line. She never looked up. And I think for me, it just brought back that memory.
Mm.
And so when I began to leave the store, I walked up to her and I told her, I said, hold your head up. I said, you are beautiful,
That's
you
so
know.
good. Uh
And she looked and she gave just a little smile. And I said, no, look at me. I said, I'm just like you. I said,
huh.
look at me, look at my smile, look at the radiance. I'm like, you are beautiful,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And I just kind of encouraged her. Um, and I've seen people, with vitiligo and things of that nature, but I was never led to like say anything or anything of that nature. But I did see her, and that kind of, touched me. And I was like, wow. And then I kind of went to work. And once I got to work, for whatever reason, God led me to a website. Because again, I told you, once they told me it was no cure, I never sought out any treatment. I never sought out any type of support group or anything of that nature.
Mm-hmm.
So I think my curiosity just kind of led me to saying, okay, well, what is going on in the vitiligo world?
Okay.
And I came across this website. And in this website, there were different blogs, and it had different people of different ages, ethnicity backgrounds,
Mm-hmm.
and they were talking about vitiligo, and they were sharing their story of how some was isolated. They cover themselves up. They never go out in public. One person, was in such a state of depression. They don't feel worthy. All of these different sad things. And then I
Mm-hmm.
saw how there were different people would go to the extreme as far as different treatments
Mm-hmm.
to reverse it or slow down the progression of it, taking radiation, sun tanning, and up to 50 pills a day. Just these extreme measures, just
Mm-hmm.
as a form of treatment, but not an actual cure.
Okay.
And then what really got to my heart was I read a foundation of a parent whose son committed suicide. He was in college, he was doing well, he was aspiring, and he was around 25. And he was diagnosed with vitiligo.
Mm-hmm.
And shortly after, he committed suicide. So it was a page or foundation where they're trying to raise funds to bring awareness to vitiligo and suicide, those victims of suicide. But his was due to not being able to handle or being able to live with that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was sitting there and my heart was just so crying out to where it was all God, because I just took a sticky and I wrote down the title, The Dark Side That Birthed My Worship. And I
Mm-hmm.
told my husband, I said, I think I'm about to write a book.
Yeah.
And he said, I didn't know you was gonna write a book. I said, I didn't know either. I said, but and a year later, I began to just diligently start writing. And I think for me, it was a healing process for me as well, because I had to dig back
Mm-hmm.
and break free of those things I never spoke about.
Yeah. So now Patricia asks, how was dating for you? Was it hard?
Um,
You nosy, Patricia.
no. I wouldn't say it was hard. I did have my daughter, my oldest daughter. I had her when I was 18, a senior in high school.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I wouldn't say it was hard. I did. I didn't date many. I would say that. Because I've been married. I've been with my husband for like 23 years.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah. And so it wasn't so much as hard. I did experience bad encounters though. It
Mm-hmm.
was a guy that appeared to like me for who I was. But in the end, he tried to rape me because he wanted to get under under my clothes to see what I look like.
That is interesting.
And because I did not accept that,
Yeah.
yeah, he tried to rape me and left me in a place pretty much to die. So I
Mm-hmm.
did have a very bad experience when it came to a couple of situations and encounters. But overall, the few people that I have dated, one I ended up marrying, and the
Yeah.
other one was my daughter's father.
Excellent. Excellent.
Hmm.
So, I know that you were saying that in the book, some of these things that actually happened with you, your family and friends was like, I just never knew, Latoya.
Hmm.
Did you have to, I guess, get them ready or prepare them for the things that you was going to share in the book in advance?
Um, I tried to prepare my parents and
Okay.
my brothers. I have two brothers. I
Mm-hmm.
tried to prepare them when I told them that I was writing the book, and I told them it was about, my vitiligo, and it was about things that I never spoke about. But I don't think they understood it to the extent, because once I began to share some of the encounters that I talk about in the book, their look of shock was just the same as anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I did, explain to them, like, I'm going to be talking about some things that I never talked about. I'm going to be sharing things that I've never, that you don't even know. And we lived in the same household all my life.
I always wonder though, I'm not a parent, I don't have any kids, but
Hmm.
I always wonder how parents feel about finding out something about their child after the fact, and if they begin to blame themselves on how their child has felt about something. Do you think that your parents took on, I guess, maybe that responsibility of how you felt like after they read about it?
Um, I don't think so.
Mm-hmm.
They haven't expressed it yet, but I don't believe so. I know in just conversating with my father, he just mentioned, I never knew. I wish you would have said something. So it could have been just a small percentage of I could have did something if
Okay.
you would have said something. I'm sure that as a parent, we would feel that way.
Hmm.
Once we find out our children experience some type of pain or a trauma,
Yeah.
it's always that, what I could have done different or said different.
Hmm.
But I don't think it was to the place where they felt a form of guilt or anything like
That's
that.
good. That's
Hmm.
good. Yeah. So, how do you feel that vitiligo actually hindered you from worshiping God?
Because initially I blamed God. because I didn't understand why me. Um, and when you're in a place of blaming, you can't see or you can't hear.
Mm-hmm.
So again, I grew up in a church, but it wasn't until I was 14 to where I personally experienced him. And it wasn't that I heard something different from what I've heard all the time I was there. It's
Mm-hmm.
just a matter of my heart being open at the time of me crying out that time versus all of the other times.
Mm-hmm.
And I shifted my focus too. So it hindered me in the beginning because I wasn't trying to hear it. I wanted to be dark. I wanted to be the way I was. I wanted to be considered normal. I want to have one tone. I don't want to have to go get on the public transportation and I have to sit by myself because no one wants to sit by me. Or
Well,
the
shoot,
little
well,
kids.
hey, now, Latoya, now sitting by yourself on public transit, I'll be like, thank you.
Yeah, now I did get to
Uh,
that place. But then you have those little kids like pointing and trying to figure out, or even parents who pull their kids away because they don't know.
mm,
So it was, I don't want to deal with this. I
yeah.
wasn't born with it. Why do I have to live with it?
Mm-hmm.
So it was more so, God, take this away from me
Mm-hmm.
because you told me you will answer my prayers. You told me if I ask, you will give it to me. So being a young girl, that's all I knew. I'm asking you to let me wake up and these patches are not here.
Yes.
you know?
Yes. I
So it
prayed
was
that prayer about my hair. I'm like, Jesus, why can't my hair be like the baby dolls? Nice and straight.
nice, right. But yeah, so I was angry,
Mm-hmm.
bitter, and just felt alone, like no one understood me.
Mm-hmm.
And so that ultimately hinders anything that you put more focus in and take more focus away from God will hinder you from being able to worship God
Yeah.
or even just looking or hearing him.
So what's your resolution? Like, why do you think God created you like this?
I believe he created me like this because I am unique. Um, and as the word tells us, we are set free. We are free by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony.
Mm-hmm.
And even though there's others who have vitiligo, I have my vitiligo and I have my story, and my testimony is different from that next person's testimony,
Mm-hmm.
right? So my process and my healing and my deliverance through it, I believe, is a part of the purpose and the plan that he has for us all. One of the things for me, as I said, being a prophet or being a mouthpiece for God, I have to first be delivered from the thing that I've been holding on and being bondage to in order for me to be able to speak and release what thus says the Lord in someone else's life that can cause their life to change.
Mm-hmm.
And at one point, I wasn't able to do that. Like I said, at one point, I used to be so emotional, be shaking, sweating, everything. Couldn't
Yeah.
speak in front of no one. But how can I be a mouthpiece when I won't open my mouth?
Mm-hmm.
So I believe with that and just being the one person, the unique person to have it, it got to be a purpose and plan out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, God, what is that? I've accepted it. I'm unique. I'm the one spotted girl, the one raccoon girl. Now, what is my purpose? And how can I use this imperfected thing that I think is imperfected and you perfect it for
Mm-hmm.
your glory?
Mm-hmm. So now, if we had somebody that is actually watching the show with vitiligo and they are at that dark place, what would you say to them?
I will say, look up. I would say, focus on who God has called you to be. I would say meditate on who he is to you in your life. The simple things. You still have breath. You still have every activity of your limbs. And take that energy of that vitiligo. One of the things that I would do, and even sometimes, even now, I would take it and divert the attention by joking about it or making someone else laugh to divert the pain that I have.
Mm-hmm.
But just getting in that place of reminding yourself daily who God has called you to be, who you are in him. You're bold, you're beautiful. The same person when you woke up without that spot is the same person when you woke up with it. It's just a matter of directing that energy and saying, okay, God, now I got it. How do I use this for your glory?
Mm-hmm.
And that's very hard. It's not nothing that goes overnight. It has to be a consistent thing to
Yeah.
where you have to consistently remind yourself who you are and when you find out who you are. And the only way you can do that is in him.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, again, I began to say prayers, and those prayers became a part of me. And then I enc- encountered him.
Mm-hmm.
But before, my language was, I hate this. I would be at night scratching my skin to bleed because I'm trying to just scratch it away, remove it away. And I took that and started saying, okay, God, taking this one prayer. I started with one prayer, Psalms 23.
Mm-hmm.
And that broke that for me, but it was a consistent thing. It was
Yeah.
years of me consistently getting in that place and just reminding myself. So I would say that to someone who has vitiligo. I also would say, because it is a mental instability and mental battle, and can be a psychological issue, to reach out, to speak out about it, to get help, to get support, different support systems, those who around you, if they are support, lean more into them and speak about it, because that's what I didn't do. I didn't have any support as far as someone that has vitiligo or a support group of that nature. But I did have family around me, and I did have my church family. But outside of that, I didn't have those type of things. And so those things are out here to help you, to encourage you, to inspire you. And when you get around those that are like-minded, from in a sense, that has vitiligo, then that encourages you as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I would even, I would definitely say that, because that's one of the things that I did not do, you know. But I know now, even just being in a community, just through the book and just meeting and connecting with different people that has vitiligo, has encouraged me even on a whole nother level.
Yeah. Yeah. And I want to just talk to the parents that do have children or a child that has vitiligo, because I think that sometimes when we cannot relate with somebody, we brush it off. Oh, my child will be fine. They don't need such and
Mm-hmm.
such.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that you really just have to take heed to what Latoya is saying, in that this is not your journey. So, yes, you cannot relate, to
You
your
can't.
child in this. And so that's why it's so important that you, as a parent, find these different support groups for your child that is going to help
Yes.
them, and don't think that, oh, well, they grow up in a loving household, we okay. Like, no.
No, no, and that's the thing. That's
Yes.
the thing. Yes, you can grow up in a loving household. I've heard it. I didn't grow up in a house where it's like, oh, you ugly, oh, you this. I
Mm-hmm.
was pushed away. No, it wasn't overly expressed as far as, the love and things are like that in communication per se. But I was always told I was beautiful. I
Yeah.
was always told, oh, ain't nothing. And then I was always told, ain't nothing wrong with you. You okay. You just as normal as anybody else. Those things are needed and important too as a parent. But that child has to go to school and be bullied.
Mm-hmm.
I went through bullying. And one year, over a summertime, had patches. So I had to go back to school in middle school, see those same kids who I saw in sixth grade. But now in seventh grade,
Mm-hmm.
I had to experience bullying from the same kids, but the cruelty of the things that come out of their mouth. You have to be consistent and intentional with your child as far as talking to them. Even go a step further as talking to the staff and the teachers in the school and letting them know the sensitivity of it.
That's good.
Because that child can say they are okay, and they can say they just as beautiful. And most of them are born with the boldness and confidence and beauty of it, yes. But
Mm-hmm.
at some point, they're still trying to figure out, why me?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They're still trying to figure that out. But the love and the support, that is so overly needed. And just being sensitive and just saying, hey, but how are you doing? Just because they say they're okay, ask them, how are you doing in regards to your vitiligo?
That's good that you got real specific.
How are you doing with that? Like, even my daughter, there was a point in her grammar school years to where she was being teased by children at school because they were calling her mother white.
Okay.
And I didn't even know she was experiencing that until when I would go to the school with her demeanor towards me would be different. And then I realized, and I asked her, I'm like, what is the problem? What is going on?
Mm-hmm.
And that's when she expressed it and said, because I get tired of going to school telling them that my mother is not white. So even from that perspective, with brothers, my brothers, they dealt with it, and we never came together and actually talked about it. But I just heard from other kids in the neighborhood and things of that nature. So my brothers, they fought. They were protecting, to where if they heard someone speaking or asking a question, or if someone had enough nerve to come to them and try to ask them, they would immediately fight.
They're like, no question. We don't ask questions here.
It was no question. So they were protective. But can I say how they really felt about being my brother with me having this? I can't tell you that, because we never had those family inner circle conversations. And so that's what's needed when it comes from parents and siblings who has a child with vitiligo.
This is good. This is good. So I know that you actually have an upcoming webinar. Can you tell our viewers what it's about?
I'm kind of working on something, but it's more so geared towards just bringing awareness to vitiligo. At one point, I did an event called Cancer Survivors, and it kind of bring awareness to those who were survivors of cancer. But now I want to generalize it more so of just bringing awareness to those who have vitiligo, but then are survivors and overcomers of it, to bring awareness and to bring inspiration and encouragement to those who are dealing with it as well, and extend it to the place of anyone who's battling with some type of darkness. It can be depression, it can be some type of sickness, a condition that you may have to live with, but don't know how to live with it. Just things of that nature, and just bringing awareness to whatever dark moments and dark areas that you may or may not be struggling with. Bringing awareness and bringing those around that can encourage you and bring healing and just bring even deliverance to that. That's something I'm kind of working on, just bringing a full awareness and gearing it more so with children as well. And just, bringing the children together in a community that's the ones who have vitiligo, but the ones who don't, on how to be friends and how to be sensitive to those who actually have it, or just any abnormality.
So now, if you guys are interested in that webinar, make sure that you go ahead and like and follow Latoya's Facebook page that's listed in the description box, so that when she posts when that webinar will be, that you'll be notified for that. Also, I listed Latoya's email address, and her website is in the description box as well. One of the things that you actually mentioned when you were talking about, your daughter going to school, and, you saw that she was treating you a little differently. I was thinking about you all as parents, just creating that open communication with your children, so that when they are experiencing something, because I look at it as a child saying, oh, I'm not going to tell mama because this is going to hurt her feelings.
Yeah.
And so just having that open communication where they're not going to be scolded when somebody, when they express something to you, as a child with vitiligo, or, vice versa. And so I'm telling you, I'm an aunt, and like I got all the answers. They be like, girl, it does not work like that. But in my mind, it just works like that. But I'm just saying, like, try to create that type of atmosphere, with your kids, so that they have that openness with you. So Patricia said that this is a really good discussion. Thank you so much, Patricia.
Thank you.
And she said she applauds you as
Thank you.
well.
Thank you.
So you guys, if you are interested in purchasing Latoya's book, make sure you go to the description box, because I have the Amazon link in the description box, as well as you can purchase her book from her website. Latoya, I truly do appreciate you for your openness on the show, and just helping us have a better understanding of what vitiligo is, and just more about your book.
Yes, yes. Thank you. Thank you for having me. It was such an honor.
You are welcome. And thank you all for tuning in to another episode of Authors to Know and Their Books to Read. I hope that you guys have a great day, and we will talk to you all later. Bye bye.
Bye.